Okay, so let's just very gently pacing, but putting the toes down first, and then like you're grabbing the ground. So the toes go down and you draw yourself across. So just really controlling the weight. So you really wait until the foot is active before you let the weight move. So always holding the weight back. The last thing to move is your weight, is your body, the bulk of your body. So an attacking is a straightening. You know, if you punch someone, then it's a bent arm that becomes straight, and the yielding is a bending. So here we're bending the leg in order to yield to the ground, in order to get my weight into the foot. So I'm yielding to the earth when I step. I'm not attacking the earth by pushing away from it. So I'm drawing the earth into my danchen from the foot. So when you sink and relax, you sink into the danchen, but at the same time, the earth comes up into the danchen. So the danchen is like a meeting place. So I bend the leg, I bend the leg. You just want it to be very gentle, soft. And the Thich Nhat Hanh used to say, imagine your foot is kissing the ground. So imagine when you kiss someone, you know, so your head moves towards theirs, but at the same time you're yielding. At the same time you're expecting that meeting point, which you don't want to clash at all. So as your head moves forwards, it also has a sense of moving back to actually draw the other in. Yeah, so try and feel the whole, H-O-L-E, not W-H-O-L-E. Yeah. So when you bend, you basically make a hole which you're containing. And that is the hole that you beckon the other into. So when I put my foot down, I'm making a hole here by bending the leg, which draws me towards the earth, or effectively the earth up into me. So feel the hole that you're making in the groin, these very important points here, which are analogous to these points here. So I open that space, and that causes the bending, and it causes my movement. Yeah, so what's very important, you know, John's Tai Chi was unusual in the sense that it really stressed yielding, not as a technical response to the other person, but as like an emotional, heartfelt one. So the yield comes from an opening in the heart rather than being just a technical device. So there has to be this sort of emotional transformation that you undergo. And the other will respond to that, the other will feel it. A bit like a smile, yeah. So smile, when you smile, you transform your face into a welcoming one. So here I open here. So welcoming, inviting. And just feel just how spread you need to be across the sacrum and the hips, so that this is easy, so that the knees naturally want to be bow-legged. So you want a sort of riding horseness, a bow-leggedness that comes from the openness across your lower back, rather than just from forcing your knees out. Okay, and now let's just stand in riding horse and just feel that real openness. Yeah, so like you have two holes here. And then just feel that S shape from the ground that we've been working on. So for that, you need to get your lower back just merging into your thighs. So the feeling is that your spine branches out and slips down into the ground through the legs, rather than simply sitting on a platform here. And just try and be mindful of the rising energy. So if you're successfully melting into your legs and into the ground, then that opens a channel for the rising energy to come up and infuse you with like a tingle. And now let's just feel this, the horizontal plane here. Yeah, so this again is a hole, a hollow, a cave, and you are receding back into it. So your arms have to reach forwards to balance that leaning. So what we want is to make sure that the forces are operating continuously. So I'm falling, 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 and I'm reaching, reaching, reaching. the same as I'm sinking, 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 and the same as the earth is thrusting, thrusting, thrusting. So it's a never-ending process. As soon as my mind wanders, it breaks, and I have to freeze and lock the energy out. And you just want to sort of feel the mind, that sort of concentrated mind. It's not a mind that is just really sort of focused like this. It's more like a mind that diverges. It becomes more and more open. And it can sort of, you know, things can come into it, things can go. It doesn't really matter. You're just with the feeling. It's more like a, you know, it's a feeling rather than an act of mind. Yeah? You're feeling the sinking, you're feeling the rising, you're feeling leaning back, and you're feeling reaching forwards. It's something sensual. It's of the body rather than the mind. The mind just opens up and allows it to happen. You know, so imagine your kid was to come in and start chatting to you, and you just sort of chat to them standing like this. You'd actually be doing this better, because that part of your mind would be distracted. You wouldn't be bringing your worry to bear upon the work. That would be elsewhere. Okay, and now let's just turn. So just introducing the component of turning. So remember the centrifugal and the centripetal. Now we're producing forces now with our own actions. It's no longer simply the earth operating upon me. I'm now operating upon myself. Yeah, so it's like there's no such thing as neutral in this game. Remember John used to say, if you're not for me, you're against me. And so if the mind isn't opening, then it's closing. And so, and to keep it opening, it requires just a certain mood. And it's really courageous, because it's always wanting to close around things. As soon as you have a thought, it wants us to close around it. So it's like a constant letting go. Releasing, releasing, releasing. And just really try and sink, yeah? Really feel the foot. There's nothing between the foot. There's no mind content between your heart and your foot. So in a sense, you know, when you're just standing and you're not touching anything, then the most real part of you is the sole of your foot, the part of you that's actually on the ground. That's the only part you can really rely upon. Everything else is just subject to mind, yeah? And so is always fleeting and illusory. So just feel the solidity. Feel your foot wanting to spread and get more contact. Feel the outside edge cutting in and the inside edge sucking the energy up from the ground. Okay, and now just start feel the foot that you leave behind. So the foot that becomes empty. Yeah. So the way we normally do this is to fill the leg and then bounce out of it, fill the leg, bounce out of it, fill the leg, bounce out of it. So this leg tends to just sort of collapse in and become a bit useless. So what we want is to actually get the movement coming from the empty leg. Yeah. So as I sink into this leg, I just allow my heel to come up a little, not because the knee is collapsing in and pulling it up, but in order to create this hole here. Yeah. So I just let the knee come up and that will draw me back round. Yeah. So it's my empty leg again. It's the straight leg that yields, that bends, that moves me. I'm being moved by my yielding. I'm not being moved by my attacking. The attack is just a consequence of the yield. It's almost like an embarrassing consequence, yeah? So I turn here and I just let this heel come up a little, and that will just help you make the hole, and then you will draw back. So you're sort of making like a little curve that something can nestle into, like a nest, nestling nest, a nest that nestles. It's a beautiful word. So one, and it draws in. So I lift the knee and the heel, and that brings me back. It almost wakes me up to the foot, like suddenly there's a call from over here, and I turn around as though someone's calling my name, and I just reel around. It's that sort of feeling. And when someone calls your name, your heart lifts, your heart jumps, especially if it's a voice you recognize. So I lift and that draws me back, yeah? And then just get it going like it was before, but with that That is the motor. It's the yielding is the motor. So, and just feel how, you know, that yield, that lift of the heel, that opening of the hole, it's purely an act of spirit. Wow. It's like, whoa, shit, yeah. There's a moment when everything just sort of explodes and opens up, and then it starts to cohere again, to condense. Yeah, so the spirit calls from outside, not from where you expect. Yeah, so I'm turning here, but I'm being called from over here. Yeah. Whereas the attack always comes from inside. It's like a, you know, sort of an explosion of aggression. So here we're responsive, we're responding to all these calls from around us. That gives you a sense of almost shrinking, of what, you know, you're becoming smaller because you're surrounded by all this activity. Okay, and now let's just try a little bit of this one. This is like an antidote to that in a way. So here, just really sinking into the leg and filling it. I'm just trying to get down to the earth. So just feel this hand scooping the ground. Almost like the distance between your hip and the ankle shrinks to nothing. But again, you can still the hole that's drawing you. Yeah? So when you come into the foot and you fill the foot, it's like a hollow vessel. That hole is still there in the middle of it, and it's empty. So it's like the yin yang symbol, you know, the sort of the full side contains the little dot of the empty. So it's not completely solid. It's like a you know, like a cylindrical container. So so the fuller it gets, the more gentle you have to become, so that you don't crush that core of emptiness. All the time, just feeling the sacrum dangling heavily and the lower back stretching down into the legs. So that core of emptiness within the full leg is like a hole that you can lower the spine down. I started teaching a new couple, and she's a doctor. I don't know what he is. He's really nice. He's really soft. And her speciality is like the back pain, back problems. So she was saying that we're not designed to really stand up vertically. You know, we're designed to be monkeys still, to be at this angle. And so having bent legs, it was like a real revelation to her, because she realized that that's the only way you can alleviate the back, you can relieve the back, is by having bent legs all the time. So yielding legs, legs that are bending rather than straightening. And then you can have a heart that looks up and forwards rather than down if you are at a tilt. Okay. Now let's just bring it back. So again, just feeling that sense of the sacrum relaxing down. Yeah, so in terms of your fabric, your integral structure, the operative words are really elastic and spring, like a coiled spring. So there's this sense that the legs are like these really bouncy springs, and they're just allowing you just to lower into them. They don't mind taking that load. They're not anxiously pushing up all the time because they're wimps, because they're hurting. Yeah. But also a sense that you're hanging by a spring from the ceiling. So there's a bit of a buoying here as well. Yeah, so just feel, when you let go with the arms, they sort of fall out of the shoulders. They sort of lengthen from the head, from the neck. It's from the occiput really, down and out. So if you really relax the arm, it would sort of do this. Yeah? But because you're doing both at the same time, you don't get the turn, but you still want that feeling of lengthening across the shoulder. Now you want exactly the same feeling from the sacrum across the hips and into the legs. Now that's difficult because it's being compressed, of course. But that same feeling that you're releasing the sacroiliac and the hip, and that's allowing the energy that's sinking down your spine to flow out and into the leg. So there's a sense of the joints in your hip, the sacroiliacs and the actual hip joints expanding with mind, with a mind that is flowing. Yeah? And now let's just bounce it a little bit. So again, just think of those springs, the springs in the legs, which are just really soft and delicate, really sensitive, yeah? And the spring from the ceiling. So you're boinging everywhere. Doing, doing. And just feel the earth beneath your, the ground, not as something hard and solid, but as something almost sort of spongy. So it's like a living substance rather than an inert, dead one. Yeah, so just feel the that natural frequency of your body, you know, when you're going slow, and just try and just slow it slightly more. So it's almost like you're becoming heavy. It's like the frequency depends upon your heaviness. And so you're getting slightly heavier. So you're slowing down a little bit. And then just alternate. Just feel, now we feel each leg individually. So it's a bit more realistic. Again, just feel the ground. Feel the ground under the foot you're bouncing into. That's where you're trying to get to. That's your destination. So we're trying to extend our range. And if you think of yourself being a collector of frequencies, then the refining process that goes on is collecting higher and higher frequencies. But that we also want a refining that goes in the other direction, that collects deeper and deeper, longer and longer. This is why, for me, an old person is always, in a sense, superior to a young one, because they just have a longer life, so they've been able to collect longer frequencies. And you can feel it. You can feel that that person has a content that I don't have yet. Yeah. So just feel the heels especially, so they really get into the ground. They will go really deep. So if you want to go deep into the earth, you have to use your heels. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a different world underneath. You know? It's the apartment beneath, but if you're actually on the earth, yeah, it's like when you pick up a stone, when you turn a stone over in the garden, there's a whole different world underneath it. Yeah. And you'd never guess what was there if you haven't experienced it. Yeah. It's a bit like that here. So you're open to the strange, the weird and wonderful. And now let's just dance. So just on the toes now, so not on the heels. And just now, this is more the sort of the high frequency, that sort of dancing brightness that rises up. And just think of it as like a prayer. You're repeating something in order to open up to divine influence. Yeah. And just watch your breathing. Yeah. So that's the other frequency that's really important. Again, feeling the ground. Just feel the toes. They're much more active, yeah? It's like the toes are desirous. You know, you can desire with your toes. With the heel, you can't. You just join. Yeah? It's the fingers that grab. It's the same with the toes. So the toes, if you like, they're of your passions, yeah? So it gets all this area moving and okay. And now just back to riding horse again, just feeling the sacrum and the lower spine lengthening down into the legs. Okay. And now just really feel the heels. So you're digging down, you're sinking down into the heels, and then just come forward and bring the heels up. So now you're just on the toes, so your knees are lifting. What it will want to do is bring your sacrum up. So you have to just really concentrate on the sacrum still sinking down through it. Yeah, so we just want like an illustration that the sinking and the rising can quite happily exist in the same space without cancelling each other out, without merging into like a grey mud. And then just rock back and bring the weight mainly into the heels and just feel now it's very settled. Yeah, so this is much more like the long energy of the earth. Really feel it splitting across the sacrum and down the legs. And now let's come forwards again onto the toes, but now reach out with the toes and curl them a little bit. So sort of you move into the toes from the foot, from the toes grab you forwards, and then just bring the knees up and the heels up and just settle down into the posture. So it's quite a different posture. It's slightly back, so you feel how your sacrum is slightly back. You can't get that same leaning back feeling. And just feel that the letting go that needs to go on to keep this sinking is like a courage. Something inside you has to be trusting in order to let go into these trembly feet. So here we're aiming for that shake. And then when you go back into the heels, that's all earthed, all that high frequency energy is just earthed out of you to be replaced by a stillness. Yeah. So that's really important, just to be able to feel that drain through the heels, because if you let it, that will drain the mind, that will quieten your mind. So if you're standing and the mind is not quiet, it's because the legs are not bent, but also because you're putting a barrier here. You're splitting your upper and lower body. Okay, and now let's come forwards again. So just stretch the toes and grab, come off the heel and just sink down and feel that rising whoa, tremble. And just feel that you can't think in the same way. You can't think with words, with language. That the mind is very active because you're adjusting all the time to stop yourself from falling. But you're not thinking. And then just rock back, put the heels down gently, and just relax, melt into them, as John would say. So the legs feel quite straight, but they're still bent. So you can just imagine that you've got roots growing through your heels and into the ground. And then one more. So now again, open the toes and clench and to bring yourself off the heels and sink down. And now you're infused with spirit, with a delicacy and an activity that can do things. Yeah, so this is why that dancing exercise, where you're dancing on your toes, is so important, because it just gives the foot and the calf the strength to just maintain this sort of posture for a few seconds. Okay, and then back, and again, just feel the heels rooting down. So it's like a relief, when you come onto the heels, it's like, oh, thank God. Yeah, so we don't like spirit. We like it for moments. It can be exciting and, but there's always a sense of danger and risk with spirit. It could always end in your death. Yeah. And so this is why, our culture tends to reject it. Okay, and now let's just going backwards and forwards, but just to feel the whole, the yielding. I'm moving by yielding, remember. Yeah, so I'm in my back foot. Now I just want to bend the front leg and let that draw me forwards. And then I want to bend the back leg. So it's difficult because we're so used to pushing with the bent leg straight. We're so used to straightening the bent leg in order to move. You really have to just really keep your weight in one place until the bending is sufficient to suck it out of its fullness. So I bend this leg, and then I just, slice. Just feel your weight sluggish. It's reluctant to move. Yeah, so I yield. That requires me to bend my leg, but it also requires me to open up a hole. Yeah, so it's not just a bending. It's like you're turning the one-dimensional into two dimensions. Yeah. So just, it's not just a change in degree. It's a complete transformation. Yeah? So what? And then here. And so it's like your arm is just going around someone gently. But the same with the leg. Your leg is circling that person. So you have to make a hole in the groin. Yeah. So that you make the hole in the groin, but the release that allows that hole to appear is across the sacroiliac. So it's across the back of the hip and the buttock. Yeah. So whoa. That's difficult. Yeah, so it's just ward off in the leg, really, but using that to move yourself. Yeah, so just feel how each yield is an event in itself. You can't just set up a pattern and then mindlessly perform it. Each yield needs a reality. Yeah. So the yield in your upper body invites the other person in, and the yield in the lower body draws you down and into the leg. So, yeah. And just really delay the movement of your body in order to savor, to really enjoy that transformation that you undergo in order to yield. 1, 2. Okay, and now let's just try a little bit with the other leg. Let's just go backwards and forwards a few times just to loosen everything up. Okay, and now just opening up this hole in your groin in order to move, and then here. So you just move really slowly. That's the important thing, really. Really feel it stretching. All the tendons and the ligaments are being stretched. And your heartstrings as well. Yeah, so it's like, oh, it's awful. So, yeah, so it opens, it opens, it opens, and then it starts to close. It starts to encircle, and that's really the point where you release the weight and let it move. So here, open, 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 and then, and when you go into the foot, just make sure that you can still feel that core of emptiness. It doesn't just become solid, otherwise it won't move. You need that core of emptiness for the full to want to become empty, yeah? Because it's that emptiness in the middle that wants to expand and become an attack, you see. So 1, 1. It's more difficult going back, yeah, because it's difficult to open the hip without the front leg wanting to push you back. So you really have to stay in the front leg and just let this open, and then let that openness pull you into it. Okay, and now let's just try the figure of 8 in the hips and just see how that's basically the same. So here I open something here, and that draws me around the figure of 8, that loop in the hip. Yeah. So again, just really delaying the movement of your weight. So it really is the energy that's leading you. The spirit leads the energy leads the body. And the mind is just the space, the compassionate space that you open up to allow all this to happen. The field of faith, as I saw someone say it recently. Ooh. So it opens, 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 but it doesn't matter how much it opens, it's going to close again. And that's just something that you need to really inculcate into the mind and heart through practice, because it's that gives you the courage to open. Just the knowledge that it's going to be bearable. Yeah. So it's like a balloon. It's like your openness blows the balloon up, and then you tie the balloon, if you like. Ooh. And then it just depends upon the size of your heart, really. And that just gets bigger and bigger as you get older and older, assuming you've got some sort of internal work in your life, which doesn't have to be meditation or Tai Chi or yoga. It could be just like being an artist or a poet, something where you're just allowing creative forces to come through you. Then basically your heart's expanding. You're open to openness. Yeah. Wow. So as you open the hole, there's a sense of you wanting to fall into it, but of course you can't, because then the hole will close. So there's also a sense of pulling away from it. Yeah, so you've got this sort of, ooh, this really soft, delicate, attentive respect. Okay, and now let's just bring it back to, so just always back to sinking, if you like. Down to earth, down and dirty. So just imagine you're standing in the mud and your toes are squelching around. Okay, and now let's just try a little bit of, you know, what Thich Nhat Hanh would have called mindful walking. Yeah. but our way, you know, the sort of, so with the pulling of the legs, so just balance all the time, yeah? So if someone was there and they clapped, then you'd always have your balance. You could just stop regardless. Now put the foot down, so put the toes down first, get the whole foot down, and then draw yourself into it using that leg until the other foot is off the ground, and then just step with that one. So you're using the stepping leg to pull yourself, and you can do this when you're running, yeah? So in a sense, you're those sort of Kenyan runners, those African runners that just run barefoot. You know, they have to have such a delicate, light contact with the ground, otherwise they're going to really hurt their knees. So you reach forwards with the foot, and then the foot just slowly pulls you into it, and you can feel how it pulls you down. It doesn't pull you up. You slip, you yield into the leg, you get closer to the ground each time you step. So reach and draw, and just feel the components as you reach out with the leg. That's effectively your attack. So it's got this sort of bright, wide-eyed sense. And then when you put the foot down and yield with it, it's that real softening, like you're just holding a baby. So something opens up and brightens, and then I just enclose. I wrap my arms around the loved one. Yeah? So I embrace. So, and you just want to just really savor that, the quality of that tug, the quality of the pull. It's like stretching a piece of elastic. You know how enjoyable that feels? It's like a miracle. So you get stretched and drawn. So it's really tender. It's like a tenderizing process. So you imagine if you're pushing from the ground all the time, it's basically a coarsening process. You're getting tougher. Here you're getting softer. So more tender. You're tenderizing yourself. Yeah. So if you become tougher, then you also become more resilient in a way. You also become more stupid and more ugly. Yeah. So nothing really wants to get anywhere close to you. So you really need this tenderizing, sensitizing process just to attract energy to you. So I draw myself forwards. Yeah, so the leg has to be really strong so that it doesn't want to reject you. It's quite happy just holding your weight in it. And then it's almost like it's reluctant to let you go. So the front leg really has to pull, but it has to pull in a coaxing way. If it's just violent, then it's just going to, again, produce a tightening. So it's like you sort of coax yourself forwards with a little tiny wriggle. With spirit, you need spirit to lift, to loosen everything up, and then it will become more mobile, more movable. Ooh. Yeah. So this should be one of those things you just, you want to do all day, because it's real. It's of a reality you want to inhabit. So a better reality than the one that you do inhabit. Ooh. Okay, and now let's just stand again. So just feeling that light softness. So you just become energy, really. So let's just finish with just a few rounds of this. So just breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, out. And just concentrate on the relaxing of the sacrum as you breathe in. So here, let the sacrum drop. So that just hooks you into the diaphragm. So down. Okay, and now let's just finish. So attention posture. So the important thing here is that the legs are just a little bit bent. And just feel that as soon as you bend them, you have energy. So they're not locked out. You don't lock out. You don't lock the world out. You invite it in by yielding, by bending. Okay, great. So let's finish.